before I knew my grandpa was rich. I thought he was just the only person who really looked at me. Before he took my time card, I thought he was losing his memory. Turns out, he remembered every unpaid hour. When he took that card in front of my boss, I thought I was fired. I didn't know he was about to burn my brother's future, expose 3 companies, and rewrite his will with my name in ink. My name is Isla Hudson, and at 1:47 in the morning, I was little more than a collection of aches held together by cheap coffee and sheer panic. The fluorescent lights of the midnight mart hummed a miserable, high-pitched whine, a soundtrack to my exhaustion. They flickered over the aisles of brightly colored junk food and sad, plastic-wrapped vegetables. I was on hour 18 of my day, clocking out from job number 3, and the world had dissolved into a smear of harsh light and the smell of stale beer from aisle 4. My body was beyond tired. It was a hollowed-out, buzzing shell. I felt dizzy, a familiar lightheadedness that came from running on caffeine and about 4 hours of broken sleep. All I wanted was to slam my card into the time clock, stumble to the bus stop, and fall into my basement apartment for the 2 hours I had before my shift at the Rocket Bean Cafe started again. I shuffled to the cramped break room, which was really just a dark alcove behind the customer service desk. The air here was thick with the smell of old coffee grounds and microwave burritos. And there it was, the altar of our underpaid lives, the Timecard wall. It was a grid of cheap metal slots, holding maybe 50 bent and stained cardboard cards. Each one was a record of hours given away for a wage that barely kept a roof over your head. You could see the desperation in them, smudges of grease from the deli, coffee rings, streaks of ink where someone had punched in too hard. Filled with frustration, my card, slot 27, was the worst. Or the best. Depending on how you measured it, it was the fullest. Every single line was crammed with ink, my clock-ins and clock-outs bleeding into the neat blue lines until they were almost unreadable. My name, Isla Hudson, was written at the top. The letters faded from being handled so much. That card was my life. It was my 80-plus-hour week, my shame, and my only lifeline, all on one 5x8 piece of cardboard. I lifted a hand that felt like it weighed 50 pounds. My fingers, raw from the cleaning chemicals at Bright Path cleaning hours earlier, reached for the card. Just as my fingertips grazed the greasy edge, another hand shot past mine. It was a thin hand, the skin like dry paper, mapped with blue veins, but the movement was fast, precise. It plucked my time card from the slot before I could even blink. I froze. I followed the hand up a thin wrist to the cuff of a dark, old-fashioned wool coat. My eyes traveled up to the face of its owner, my grandfather. Walter Sloan. He was just standing there, under the flickering, buzzing light, holding my time card. He looked ancient and impossibly out of place. He wore polished leather shoes, the kind my father and brother wore, but his were scuffed at the toes, as if he did his own walking. A wave of pure, dizzying shock hit me. "Grandpa, what are you doing here?" My voice came out as a croak. It was almost 2 in the morning. He was supposed to be in his quiet room at the assisted living facility, the one my parents paid for. He was supposed to be, in my mother's constant, pitying words, too frail to be out this late. The family script was that Walter needed rest and quiet, that his mind was drifting. His world was supposed to be soft blankets and daytime television, not the grimy linoleum aisles of a 24-hour grocery store. "Hudson, you on the clock or off?" My head snapped around. Rick Tanner, my shift manager, was striding over. He was a man who moved with an unearned authority. His cheap polyester uniform stretched tight over his stomach. He had a fake, friendly, toothy smile plastered on his face, but his eyes were flat and annoyed. An old man loitering by the time clock was an obstacle, an inefficiency in his late-night kingdom. He stopped, his gaze flicking from me to my grandfather. His smile tightened. "What's this grandpa supervising your overtime?" He laughed, a short, barking sound. It was a jab, a reminder that I was the girl who needed 80 hours of overtime just to exist. My grandfather didn't even look at him. His attention was entirely on the piece of cardboard in his hand. He held it up to the bad light, studying it. With his thumb, he slowly, deliberately, traced the lines of ink, my frantic punches, 7:01 a.m. at Rocket Bean, 6:02 p.m. at Brightpath, 11:01 p.m. here at Midnight Mart, back and forth, day after day. Then he spoke, and his voice was nothing like the confused, frail man my family described. It was low, clear, and cut right through the hum of the freezers. You really worked all of these hours this week. It wasn't a question of confusion. It was sharp. It was an interrogation. My face burned. All the exhaustion vanished, replaced by a hot, crawling shame. To be seen like this, in my stained uniform, smelling like old bread and floor wax, by him, in front of Rick. It's fine, I muttered, looking down at my shoes. Rent's due. I've got student loans. It's just a busy week. I was downplaying it, lying. Every week was this week. 80 hours, sometimes 90. I was drowning. And here was my grandfather, holding the evidence. Rick scoffed. His patience gone. He'd lost his audience. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to give that back. He reached out. A quick, rude snatching motion. That's company property. We can't have customers touching it. My grandfather didn't flinch. He simply took one step back, a small, precise movement that made Rick's hand close on empty air. Then, as Rick stared, my grandfather calmly folded my time card in half and tucked it into the inside pocket of his wool coat. He slid it in there like it was a piece of evidence, a folded confession. The tension in the alcove spiked. The air went thin and tight. Rick's face went from annoyed to a dull, blotchy red. This was insubordination, just not from the person he could fire. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through my chest. My heart hammered. This was it. This was how I lost my job. I was on my last warning. Rick had written me up 2 weeks ago for being 5 minutes late when my bus broke down. He had been looking for a reason. Grandpa, please, I begged. My voice was thin, pathetic. Please, give it back to him. I'll get written up. Rick, I'm sorry. He gets confused. I'm not confused, Isla, he said, and his eyes met mine. They were incredibly, unusually clear. The fog my parents always talked about was gone. There was just a sharp, cold intelligence. You won't be needing this much longer. It landed between us, a sentence that sounded like a threat and a promise all at once. Rick let out a laugh, a sound of pure managerial frustration. Right, okay, look, old man, payroll gets finalized at 8 a.m. If I don't have that card, it's going to be a complete mess. He tapped his pen on his clipboard, his smile returning, meaner this time. We'll probably just have to round down your hours for the week. Can't pay what we can't prove, right? My grandfather's jaw tightened. I saw a small muscle flex beneath his papery skin. He had caught every single word. He understood the threat perfectly. My stomach turned to ice. Round down. That meant losing hours I had already worked. That meant my student loan payment would bounce. That meant a $35 overdraft fee. That meant choosing between my bus pass and ramen. These 3 awful, soul-crushing jobs were the only thing standing between me and hunger, between me and the street. Losing even one of them, or getting my pay docked, would collapse the whole fragile house of cards I'd built. I was terrified. Walter Sloan looked at me for one more second. He didn't say anything else to Rick. He just turned, his scuffed shoes quiet on the linoleum, and started walking toward the front of the store. The automatic doors hissed open, letting in a gust of cold, damp night air that smelled like exhaust. He paused in the doorway, a thin, dark silhouette against the empty parking lot. He looked back at me, standing frozen and humiliated next to my furious boss. You'll understand on Sunday, he called out. His voice was calm, but it carried perfectly back to me. Sunday. The word hit me like a slap. Sunday. His combined 80th birthday and the family legacy dinner. The dinner I was specifically, painfully, and publicly uninvited from. The dinner where my parents were going to celebrate my cousin Logan. the golden boy, the future of the family. The dinner I was supposed to pretend wasn't happening. The doors hissed shut, and he was gone. I was left alone in the buzzing, fluorescent light, my hands empty. Rick was already muttering, scribbling furiously on his clipboard. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. This is coming out of your pay. Hudson, I guarantee it. I didn't hear him. I reached out and gripped the cold, metal edge of the time clock station. The steel bit into my fingers. The only solid thing in the room. My heart was racing, a frantic bird in my chest. I imagined the worst. Fired. My pay docked to nothing. Blacklisted from this job. Maybe the others. Cut out of the family completely. Finally, for good, I thought, standing there at 2 a.m, that my grandfather had just destroyed the last tiny scrap of my life. I had no idea. I had no idea that stolen, greasy Timecard was about to blow my entire world apart. I wasn't always this person, the one reeking of stale coffee and bleach at 2 a.m. I wasn't born to punch a clock. That's the irony. I was born a Sloan. My family doesn't just have money. They are money. Sloan Ridge Properties isn't just a business. It's the beginning and end of every family conversation, the standard by which all of us were measured. From the time I was old enough to understand what escrow meant, the path was laid out for me in crisp architectural blueprints. My parents, Eric and Valerie Sloan, saw my future as an extension of their own. "You'll join the company, Isla," my father would say at dinner. It was never a question. "You'll learn the ropes under Logan." Logan, my cousin, the golden boy, the heir apparent. Logan lived and breathed Sloan Ridge. He loved the smell of fresh-cut lumber and the sharp, satisfying click of a high-end lockbox. He was only 2 years older than me, but he'd been closing deals since he was in college. He was the future. I was supposed to be his slightly less impressive, but still valuable, accessory. The problem was, I'd seen what the family business really meant. I'd seen what revitalizing a neighborhood looked like on the ground. It looked like triple-digit rent hikes. It looked like eviction notices tacked to the doors of families who had lived there for decades. I didn't want to flip properties. I didn't want to build glass towers that displaced people. When it came time for college, I didn't choose business or real estate law. I enrolled in the social work program. I wanted to major in nonprofit administration. I wanted, in a way that seemed disgustingly naive to them, to actually help people. The reaction was cold and swift. My mother, Valerie, called me sentimental with a look of deep disappointment. My father, Eric, was more direct. He called me ungrateful. That was the word that stuck, ungrateful, because I didn't want the silver-plated future they had designed for me. I was ungrateful. The final hammer fell at my graduation. I was standing in my cap and gown, proud of the degree I had worked hard for. My father took me aside, away from the celebrating families. He wasn't smiling. "If you don't want to be part of the family business, Isla," he said, his voice quiet and level. "Don't expect family money." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, a closing of a ledger. I had breached the unwritten contract of my birth. He cut me off, completely. No access to the trust fund that had always been a vague, shimmering promise, no help with an apartment, no car, no family insurance plan. Nothing. At 22 years old, armed with a degree in helping people, I was suddenly and completely on my own. The reality of no family money is a cold, fast shock. Rent in this city is a nightmare. My student loans didn't care that my father was disappointed in me. So, I took the first job I could find, a 5 a.m. opening shift as a barista at the Rocket Bean Cafe. The pay was minimum wage, plus whatever tips I could scrounge by forcing a smile before the sun was up. It wasn't enough, not even close. So I found a second job, an evening janitorial shift with a company called Bright Path Cleaning, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., 5 nights a week. I scrubbed toilets and vacuumed carpets in silent, empty office buildings. It still wasn't enough. My share of a tiny, damp basement apartment, plus utilities, a bus pass, and the minimum payment on my loans. I was still in the red every month. I was still hungry, That's when I found job number 3, the overnight stock shift at the Midnight Mart, from 11 p.m. until 2 a.m., 4 nights a week. It was brutal, soul-killing work, but it closed the gap, barely. My life became a blur of uniforms. The green apron of Rocket Bean, stained with espresso, the gray polo of Brightpath, smelling of industrial cleaner, the blue vest of Midnight Mart, the pockets weighed down with a box cutter, at family gatherings, the few I was still invited to back then. The humiliation was a physical thing. I'd show up, dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide, and my family would look at me with this awful mix of pity and disgust. They'd be toasting Logan. To Logan. Just promoted to Vice President of Acquisitions. Champagne flutes would click. My cousin, smelling of expensive cologne and success, would accept the praise with a humble dip of his head. Then all eyes would turn to me. My mother would sigh, a performance of maternal suffering. Isla is still finding herself. She's working a few side gigs, my father would add. His voice clipped. She's choosing this, out of stubbornness. Side gigs. As if I was working 80 hours a week for fun. As if I was choosing to clean up other people's garbage while my cousin signed multi-million-dollar deals. The absolute worst was Thanksgiving. 2 years ago, we were all at my parents' massive, beautifully decorated home. The table was groaning under the weight of food I only dreamed of. I was so tired I could barely hold my fork. I'd just come from a frantic morning shift at Rocket Bean and had to leave early to get to my evening shift at Brightpath. Logan was holding court, talking about a new condo development. Everyone was hanging on his every word. I made the mistake of mentioning that I was hoping to get promoted to shift lead at the cafe. My mother, Valerie, laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound that filled the entire dining room. She turned to the rest of the table, to our aunts and uncles, and her pristine friends. "If Isla ever learns to stick with one job," she announced, her smile wide and bright, "maybe we'll trust her with real responsibility." The table erupted in polite, supportive laughter. It felt like swallowing acid. I looked down at my plate, my face burning, fighting back tears that I refused to let them see. I risked a glance across the table at my grandfather, Walter. He was always quiet at these functions, a relic from a different time. He was just watching. His fork was paused mid-air, a piece of turkey hovering. He looked at my mother, then at Logan, then his eyes met mine. They were sharp, assessing, but he said nothing. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell my mother she was being cruel. He just slowly put the fork down, his silence a deafening confirmation. In that moment, I knew. He agreed with them. I was the family's official disappointment. After that, I stopped trying to explain. I just worked. My body began to pay the price. I'd nod off on the bus, my head hitting the cold window, and wake up with a jolt, panicked that I'd missed my stop. I lived on day-old pastries from the cafe that Naomi, my only real friend there, would slip into my bag. I ate instant noodles, microwaved in the filthy break room at Midnight Mart, the styrofoam tasting like chemicals. I started having fainting spells. The world would go gray and fuzzy at the edges, and I'd have to grip the edge of the espresso machine until the feeling passed. I had panic attacks in the cleaning supply closet at Brightpath, breathing in the smell of bleach, my heart hammering, convinced I was going to die in a gray uniform and no one would find me for hours. I told no one, my old friends from high school, the ones who grew up in the same privileged world as my family. They pulled away. I was a downer. I couldn't go out for $20 cocktails. I couldn't talk about weekend trips to the coast. All I had to talk about was my exhaustion. They stopped calling. The only person who checked in was Naomi Fields. She worked the morning shift with me at Rocket Bean. She saw the real me. She'd force me to sit for 5 minutes, slide me a sandwich she'd made by mistake, and just ask, "You okay, Isla?" She never judged. She just knew. The family narrative hardened into fact. Logan was the future. Isla was the cautionary tale. "Don't be an Isla." They repeated the lie so often, so publicly, that even I started to wonder if they were right. Maybe I was lazy. Maybe I was stubborn. Maybe this was all my fault. The irony was suffocating. While I was scrubbing floors, Sloan Ridge Properties was throwing lavish galas. I'd see the photos on social media. My parents, Eric and Valerie, in shimmering gowns and tailored tuxedos. They'd be standing under massive crystal chandeliers, champagne in hand, smiling for the cameras, and I knew those chandeliers. I knew them intimately, because the galas were often held at the Crestline Room, one of the most exclusive venues in the city, and Bright Path Cleaning had the contract. I had been there. On my night shift, I had personally dusted every single one of those crystal pendants. I had vacuumed the plush carpet my mother stood on. I had polished the brass fixtures she leaned against, all while smelling like floor cleaner, completely invisible. My grandfather's visits to my tiny, damp basement apartment were rare, maybe once every few months. They were always strange. He'd show up unannounced, in that same old wool coat, and just sit on the lumpy futon I used as a couch. He never brought food. He never offered money. He just asked questions. Specific, weird questions. "How many hours are you working now?" he'd ask, his voice quiet. "It's fine, Grandpa." "How many, Isla?" "About 75, 80, maybe." "And what is your hourly wage at the market?" "Grandpa, you don't need to worry about that." "What is it?" $9.50. "Are you taking breaks? Do they make you clock out for them?" I always assumed he was just old, confused about time. That his age was blurring his sense of days and numbers, making him fixate on details. I felt bad for him. I didn't want to burden his fading mind with the reality of my life, so I'd gently deflect. I'd change the subject. "How are you feeling, Grandpa?" "Are the nurses at the home being nice?" I'd pat his thin, papery hand, this old, frail man, and walk him to the door, feeling a wave of pity for him and a deep, biting shame for myself. I thought I was just grinding quietly in the background, working so hard and staying so small that my family could forget me. I thought I was just a ghost in their perfect world, the failure that made their success look so much brighter. I didn't know my grandpa was taking notes. The event wasn't just a party. In my family, nothing ever was. It was a statement, a black-tie legacy leadership dinner set to take place at the Crestline Room. The same glittering, soulless ballroom at the Oak Ridge Country Club that I vacuumed every Tuesday and Thursday night. This wasn't just any dinner. It was a carefully engineered combination my grandfather Walter's 80th birthday rolled into a public ceremony where, as rumor had it, official control of Sloan Ridge Properties would finally be passed to Logan. It was a coronation disguised as a birthday. I didn't hear about it from my parents. Of course not. I found out from Naomi. We were on our 10-minute break at Rocket Bean, huddled by the back door where the alley smelled like sour milk. She was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving a mile a minute. "Ugh, your family is at it again," she muttered. "What now?" I asked, not really wanting to know. I was rubbing my temples, the pre-dawn caffeine headache already starting. She turned the phone screen toward me. It was my mother's public profile. Valerie Sloan, smiling in a perfectly lit garden, her arm linked with Logan's. My cousin looked like a magazine ad, all teeth and expensive tailoring. The caption was bubbly, punctuated with just the right emojis. "So proud to celebrate Dad's big 8-0 and the future of our family legacy. Big things ahead for Sloan Ridge, family legacy, blessed." My stomach did a familiar, cold flip. I stared at the photo, the future of our family legacy. It was so public, so clean, a perfect narrative, with no room for a daughter who worked 3 jobs and smelled like bleach. "Are you going?" Naomi asked, her voice soft. I haven't gotten an invitation yet," I said. The lie tasted like ash. But for the next week, a pathetic, stupid thread of hope kept pulling at me, every day. After my shift at Rocket Bean, and before I had to leave for Bright Path, I'd check the mailbox. It was a rusted, dented metal box in the damp, concrete hallway of my basement apartment building. I'd shuffle past the overflowing recycling bins, my heart doing a stupid little jump, and I'd tell myself I didn't even want to go. I didn't want to sit there and watch them worship Logan, but I'd open the little metal door, and every day, it was just junk mail. Credit card offers I'd never qualify for, pizza flyers, a utility bill, no tiny, thick, cream-colored envelope, no invitation. The hope started to feel like a sickness. I was checking my email, my spam folder, even my text messages, thinking maybe they'd send a digital invitation to the unimportant family members. Nothing. Then, one evening, my phone finally rang with my mother's name. I was sitting on my lumpy futon, lacing up my worn-out sneakers for my shift at Brightpath. My heart hammered. Now, I picked up. Hello. Isla. Honey. Hi. It was her voice, but it was the one she used for difficult clients. That rehearsed, gentle, slightly too high tone. My stomach sank. Hi, Mom. So, I know you've probably heard we're planning a little something for your grandfather's birthday. A little something, a black tie event at the Crestline Room. I've seen the posts, I said, my voice flat. Yes, well, a pause. I could hear her take a delicate sip of something, probably wine. We just wanted to let you know. We're keeping it intimate, honey. Just close family and key business partners. It's a very important night for the company. The words hung there. Just close family. The implication was so loud it was deafening. I was not included in that circle. My throat felt tight, like it was closing up. I had to ask. I had to make her say it. So, my voice cracked, and I hated myself for it. Am I included in close family? The silence on the other end of the line was the answer. It stretched on, just the faint static of the connection. I counted to 5. I could picture her, swirling her wine glass, trying to formulate a gentle, corporate-approved rejection of her own daughter. Before she could, a new voice took over the line, impatient and sharp. My father. Valerie, just give me the phone. There was a rustle, and then Eric's voice, devoid of all pleasantry. Isla, you've distanced yourself from this family. You made that choice. This night is about honoring the people who have actually carried the business, the people who have contributed. Contributed. I thought of my 80-hour work weeks, the exhaustion that felt like it was seeping into my bones. I can't just drop my jobs. Dad, I whispered. We're not talking about your hobbies, he snapped. And then, as if this whole phone call wasn't a deep enough humiliation, I heard a third voice chime in from the speakerphone, light and cruel. My cousin, Logan. Hey, look, I can't have you crashing in smelling like floor cleaner at my big moment. You know. He laughed, like he'd just told a clever joke. My vision blurred. That was it. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. Before they could hear the sob that was clawing its way up my throat, I pressed the end call button. The silence of my tiny apartment was absolute. I sat there, sneakers half on, for a long, frozen minute. Then the tears came. Hot, angry, humiliating tears. They mixed with the faint, ever-present smell of bleach that clung to my clothes, to my skin, smelling like floor cleaner. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my hoodie, grabbed my work badge, and left. I went to Brightpath. I scrubbed toilets in a high-rise office building, the kind of place Sloan Ridge Properties owned. I scrubbed them until my hands were red and raw, the acrid fumes of the chemicals stinging my eyes, making the tears invisible. The universe, it seemed, was not done kicking me. A few days later, I was on my last 15-minute break at Midnight Mart. It was almost 1:30 in the morning. I was sitting on a stack of flattened cardboard boxes, scrolling numbly through my phone, just trying to keep my eyes open. And there it was. Not a post from my family, but a public, sponsored post from the Crestline Room's official account. It was a slick, professionally shot photo of the main ballroom, glittering and empty. The caption tagged my father, Eric Sloan. We can't wait to host the esteemed Sloan family and all the partners who matter most for their legacy leadership dinner this Sunday. It's an honor to be part of such a momentous occasion. The partners who matter most. My fingers were trembling as I scrolled down to the comments. They were a flood of sycophantic praise. The Powerhouse Sloan clan, an inspiration. Such a beautiful, successful family. Congratulations to the Sloans. And then, one hit me right in the gut. A comment from a local business journal account. Logan Sloan, your grandfather must be so proud to pass the torch to you, a well-deserved honor. My mother, Valerie, had replied to that specific comment, not with words, just with a string of shiny, perfect heart emojis. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. Out of some dark, masochistic curiosity, I clicked on my mother's profile. A blank page loaded, and then, the words in small gray letters, "You are blocked from seeing this user's posts." They hadn't just not invited me, they hadn't just insulted me, they had actively, digitally erased me, wiped me from the public narrative. The ungrateful daughter didn't exist. My phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. You're not going to like this. A screenshot loaded. It was from my mother's private, blocked from me feed. A picture of her and Logan at a high-end boutique, laughing, holding up a sleek tuxedo. The caption, "Finding the perfect suit for the man of the hour. My son, future CEO, proud mom." I didn't reply. I just shut my phone off. The final, brutal confirmation came the next day. I was at Rocket Bean, pulling shots of espresso, my smile aching from being plastered on my face for 4 hours. The bell over the door chimed, and Harold Pierce walked in. Mr. Pierce was an old family friend, an investor who had known my father for decades. He'd known me since I was a little girl, the one who used to steal cookies at his summer barbecues. His face lit up when he saw me. "Isla, wonderful to see you, my dear." He ordered his usual cappuccino, his eyes crinkling. "You're working here now. Good for you. Good work ethic." I just nodded, handing him the cup. "Well, I'll see you at the big dinner on Sunday, right?" he said, beaming. "Your grandfather's 80th. Can't believe it. It's going to be the event of the season." I froze. The entire cafe seemed to fall silent. I could feel Naomi's eyes on me from the pastry case. "Oh," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I wasn't invited. Mr. Pierce." His smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. His face fell, his eyes clouding over with a look that was 1,000 times worse than my family's cruelty. It was pity, pure, unadulterated pity. The look you give someone who is truly, hopelessly lost. The look that branded me, right there in the middle of the morning coffee rush, as the family's shame. "Oh," he stammered, his face flushing. "Oh, dear, well, I must have misunderstood the arrangements. I'm sorry." He fumbled for his wallet, dropped a $10 bill on the counter, and hurried out the door without his change. That look of pity hit me harder than Logan's insults, harder than my father's anger. It was the public stamp on my exclusion. That night, I went home. I didn't turn on the single dim lamp in my basement apartment. I just stood in the dark, my bag still on my shoulder. I stared at the back of my bedroom door. My 3 uniforms were hanging there, side by side, on plastic hangers. The green apron, the gray polo, the blue vest. They looked like the costumes for a ghost. The ghost of Isla Sloan, the invisible girl who scrubbed the floors and poured the coffee and stocked the shelves. While the real family celebrated in the light, a cold, quiet rage, different from any I had ever felt, settled into my chest. It wasn't hot. It was heavy. I was done. I was done being the invisible one in my own family. I was done being the person they could erase. The rage I felt that night in my apartment didn't fuel me. It just added weight. It was one more heavy thing to carry as I punched the clock at Brightpath. The week after the phone call, after the blocking, after the public pity of Harold Pierce, was a blur of pure physical endurance. I took extra shifts. I said yes to everything. If I was moving, I didn't have to think. If I was working, I was invisible. And right then, Invisible felt safer than being erased. It was Wednesday night, or maybe Thursday. The days had melted together. I was in the lobby of the Kensler Tower, one of the most prestigious buildings downtown. It was all polished black marble and silent, intimidating steel. It was just me and the echo of my mop bucket rolling across the floor. It was late, maybe 9 p.m. I was mopping, just back and forth, back and forth. The chemical smell of the floor cleaner was sharp in my nose. I remember staring at the reflection of the overhead lights on the wet marble. They looked like blurry stars. I was thinking about how many stars I'd have to mop before the floor was done. My vision started to do that gray, fuzzy thing it did when I stood up too fast. The edges of the lobby blurred. The hum of the ventilation system seemed to get very loud, then very far away. I thought, I just need to lean on the mop for a second. I didn't just lean. My legs, which had been trembling for an hour, just stopped. They buckled. There was no pain, just a sudden absence of the floor. My knees hit the hard marble, a wet, smacking sound. The heavy industrial mop handle slipped from my numb fingers. It clattered, the sound echoing, loud and violent, across the massive, empty space. I remember thinking, I have to pick it up. The next thing I remember is a man's voice, one of the other cleaners from the third floor, shouting my name. Isla, hey Isla. Then, the world wasn't black marble. It was harsh red and blue lights, flashing, flashing, flashing through a window. The smell of the mop cleaner was gone, replaced by the sharp, clean, terrifying smell of antiseptic. I was cold. Someone was cutting my gray Bright Path polo shirt up the side. The lights in the emergency room were worse than the Midnight Mart. They were a flat, painful white. A young doctor with tired eyes was standing over me. Isla Hudson, he asked, reading from a chart. You're 27. I nodded. My lips felt cracked and dry. Well, Isla, you gave your coworkers quite a scare. Your blood pressure is dangerously low. You're severely dehydrated. You're malnourished. And based on what your coworkers said, you're suffering from dangerous levels of sleep deprivation. You collapsed from pure exhaustion. He looked at me over the chart, his expression not unkind, just weary. He'd seen this before. When was the last time you had a full meal? I tried to think. I had coffee, I whispered. My voice sounded like rust. Right, he sighed. We have you on an IV drip. We need to keep you overnight for observation. Is there anyone we can call family a partner? My family. I pictured my mother, annoyed at the interruption. I pictured my father's disgust. I heard Logan laughing about the smell of floor cleaner. No, I said, and the lie came out surprisingly strong. There's no one? I don't want to bother anyone. The doctor looked skeptical but nodded. Okay, just rest. He left the curtained-off bay, leaving me alone with the steady, quiet beep of the heart monitor and the drip of the IV. I must have drifted off. When I woke up, the light in the bay was softer. My phone was on the bedside table. I looked at it. A new text message. It wasn't from Naomi. It was to her. I must have listed her as my emergency contact at Bright Path. They must have called her. My last text, sent at 10:14 p.m. They're taking me to St. Jude's. I'm okay, just tired. Naomi's reply. At 10:16 p.m. Oh my God. Isla, I'm texting your grandpa. My next text. Frantic. At 10:17 p.m. No. Naomi. Don't. Please. Her reply. At 10:18 p.m. Too late. He needs to know what they're doing to you. My heart seized. No. I fumbled for the phone. My fingers clumsy from the IV. But it was too late. I pictured him, confused, frail, being woken up in his quiet room. I pictured the panic it would cause. My mother would be furious. I didn't have to wait long. It felt like maybe 20 minutes. Not even... The curtain around my bed slid open with a sharp, metallic shh. It was Walter. He was standing there in the same dark wool coat, the same scuffed leather shoes. He didn't look frail. He didn't look confused or scared. He looked alert, and under his arm, tucked securely, was a thick, brown cardboard folder. He pulled the plastic visitor's chair close to the bed, the legs scraping on the linoleum. He sat down, placing the folder deliberately on his knees. I braced myself. I was waiting for the lecture. How could you do this to yourself? How could you be so irresponsible? The words my father would have used. You're embarrassing the family. The words my mother would have used. Walter just looked at me. He looked at the IV in my arm, the hospital bracelet on my wrist, and the faint bleach stain on my cut-off shirt. He didn't say any of those things. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and clear, cutting through the beeping of the monitor. "How many hours?" he asked. "Did you work this week?" "Be exact." It was the same question from the Midnight Mart, but now it had the weight of a courtroom. "Grandpa, please, it's not a big deal." "Be exact." Isla. His eyes were sharp. Tears of shame and exhaustion welled up. I couldn't fight him. I don't know. The usual. Maybe 80, 85. I started listing them, the confessions spilling out of me. It's 5-1 at Rocket Bean. That's 8 hours. Then I have a gap. Then 6-10 at Bright Path. That's 4. Then 11-2 at Midnight Mart. That's 3. But I have to get there by 10:45 for setup. And Rick at the Mart. He forgets to log the extra setup time. He says it's part of the job. So maybe 90 hours, I don't know. I lost track. Walter just nodded slowly, as if I were confirming something he already knew. He didn't look shocked. He looked satisfied. "He forgets," Walter repeated, the words flat. He tapped the folder on his lap. "That's theft." "What is that?" I asked, eyeing the folder. He untied the simple string closure and opened it. It was thick. It was overflowing with papers. My breath caught. They were photocopies. Photocopies of my pay stubs from Rocket Bean. Photocopies of my handwritten schedules from Bright Path. And copies. Copies of my time cards from Midnight Mart. Months of them. Where did you get those?" I whispered. My blood ran cold. Were you following me?" "No," he said simply. "You threw them away. You left them in the trash bag outside your apartment door. I've been collecting them. On my visits. All those visits. All those strange, specific questions. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't his mind drifting. It was research. He had been building a case." He pulled out a single sheet of paper, a ledger he'd written himself in a shaky but precise hand. "You have worked," he said, reading from the paper. "An average of 82 hours per week for the last 6 months. You are owed approximately $4,600 in unpaid overtime from the Midnight Mart alone." I just stared at him, my mind unable to process the numbers. He looked up from the folder, his eyes locking onto mine. "Isla, when was the last time this family paid for anything that didn't directly benefit Sloan Ridge Properties?" I blinked. "What? Your father? Your mother? When did they last spend a single dollar on something that wasn't a party, a car, or a donation designed to make the company look good?" I tried to think. I couldn't. I don't know." His voice, suddenly, was no longer quiet. It was sharp, filled with a cold, controlled anger that vibrated in the small space. "They call you lazy. They call you ungrateful. They say you don't contribute, and they do it while you work 3 jobs. You are working yourself into a hospital bed so they can buy tuxedos and show off at dinners you are not invited to." A sob, a real, ragged one, tore out of my chest. It was the truth. It was the whole, ugly, pathetic truth, spoken aloud for the first time. "I thought you agreed with them," I cried, the words wet and thick. "At Thanksgiving, when Mom said I couldn't hold a job, you just sat there. You said nothing. I thought you were ashamed of me, too." Walter's expression softened for just a moment. He reached out and, with a papery thumb, brushed a tear from my cheek. "Isla, if I had spoken out then, what would have happened?" I sniffled. "I don't know." "I do," he said, his voice hard again. "Your father would have called me senile. Logan would have hidden his files. Your mother would have spun it as a misunderstanding. They would have closed ranks. They would have hidden their greed. They've been doing it for 20 years. He leaned back in the chair. So I said nothing, and I watched, and I listened, and I've been counting. I've been counting every stolen minute of your life, every humiliation, every hour they let you scrub their floors. My breathing was shaky, but the tears had stopped. I was looking at a man I didn't know. This wasn't the frail, drifting grandfather from the family narrative. This was someone else. I don't understand, I whispered. What are you doing? I'm balancing the books, he said. He started to put the papers back in the folder, his movements careful and deliberate. He looked at me, and his eyes, they glinted. There was a spark in them, something young and sharp and dangerous. That small gathering, on Sunday, my stomach twisted. The dinner, I'm not invited. Grandpa, they made that very clear. I know, he said. It's a very important night, for the legacy. He smiled, and it was not a kind smile. I need you there, even if you have to trade shifts. Find a way. You need to be in that room. I can't just show up. The security won't let me in. You'll get an invitation, he said. Standing up, he tucked the folder back under his arm. It just won't be coming from your parents. He stood by the bed, looking down at me, the girl in the ruined uniform, hooked up to a bag of sugar water. He squeezed my hand, the one without the IV. His grip was surprisingly strong. You listen to me, he said, his voice low and intense. You think you're powerless right now because you're tired. You think you're nothing because they've called you nothing. But they are the ones who should be scared. They are the ones who should be terrified of what you've built. He let go of my hand, turned, and pushed the curtain aside. He walked out of the bay, his scuffed shoes making no sound on the floor. I was left alone again, with the beep of the monitor and the steady drip of the IV. I stared at the acoustic tile ceiling, the little pinpricks of black staring back at me like dead eyes. What you've built. I tried to see what he saw. I tried to understand. But from my vantage point, lying in an emergency room bed that was going to cost me $1,000 I didn't have. I hadn't built anything. All I had were bills and bruises. All I had was a legacy of exhaustion. I left the hospital the next morning against medical advice. The doctor, the same tired-eyed man, handed me a discharge sheet. You need to rest, Ms. Hudson, at least 48 hours, no strenuous activity, eat 3 full meals a day. I nodded, my face blank, knowing I would do none of those things. Rest costs money, meals cost money, the hospital bill they'd given me, which I'd shoved deep into my bag, was probably more than I made in 2 months. I couldn't afford to rest for 48 minutes. By 4:30, The next day, less than 24 hours after my collapse, I was back behind the counter at Rocket Bean. The smell of roasting espresso beans was sharp and nauseating, and my head felt like it was full of cotton. I had managed to trade my missed shift, but it meant I'd be working a double. The plastic hospital bracelet was still on my wrist, hidden under the long sleeve of my green apron. I hadn't had the energy to find scissors and cut it off. The 5SM rush began. A blur of familiar faces, finance guys in crisp suits, construction workers in dusty boots, City Hall staffers already looking stressed. I moved on autopilot. Medium drip, room for cream, large latte, extra shot, bagel, toasted. My smile felt like a mask I'd glued on, and I was terrified it would crack and fall off. Just after 6, Councilwoman Denise Parker walked in. She was a regular, always sharp and focused in a tailored suit, always reading briefing papers while she waited. She wasn't one of my family's crowd. She was actual city government, the kind that seemed to care more about bus lines and rent control than about property values. She got to the register. Morning, Isla. Just the usual. Large black coffee. Morning, Councilwoman, I mumbled, my voice hoarse as I punched in the order. I reached for a large cup, and my sleeve slid back. the white plastic hospital bracelet, with my name and date of birth printed in stark black letters, gleamed under the cafe's track lighting. Denise stopped. Her sharp eyes, the ones that missed nothing, fixed on it. "Rough night?" she asked. Her voice was soft, dropping the official, public tone. I yanked my sleeve down, my face flushing hot. "Oh, it's nothing. I just tripped. I'm clumsy." She didn't look away. She didn't buy the lie. She waited until the man behind her in line moved down to the pickup counter, giving us a bubble of privacy. "Isla," she said, leaning in slightly. "I see you in here every morning before the sun is up. I've also seen you leaving the Kensler Tower late at night when I'm driving home from a council meeting. How many jobs are you working?" The question was so direct, so seeing, it broke something in me. The fake smile I was holding crumbled. All the exhaustion and humiliation of the last few years welled up. "3," I whispered. "This one, Bright Path Cleaning, and the overnight stock shift at the Midnight Mart." Denise's expression didn't change for a second, but her eyes hardened. The look of soft, polite concern vanished, replaced by a cold, quiet fury that was almost frightening. "3," she repeated. It wasn't a question. I fainted," I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "At my cleaning job. That's why. That's why I have the bracelet. Fainted from exhaustion. I'm guessing," she said. And it wasn't a guess. "And the Mart Bright Path, are they paying you legal overtime for all these hours?" I looked down at the register. I don't think so. My manager at the Mart, Rick, he rounds down the hours. He says we can't get paid for setup time, even though he makes us come in early. He says if we complain, he'll just find someone else." Denise's fury became something sharp and focused, like a weapon. "That," she said, her voice like ice, "is called wage theft. We have active city investigations into unsafe working conditions and wage theft at several major service providers right now. If what you are telling me is on paper, Isla, it's not just unfair, it's illegal." She took a business card from her sleek wallet and, with a heavy-feeling black pen, wrote a number on the back of it. "That's my personal cell, not my office line. I want to know everything. I want to know about your pay, your breaks, your manager's threats. Call me tonight." She took her coffee. "You're a good worker, Isla," she said, her eyes scanning the room, then landing back on me. "You shouldn't be collapsing just to pay your rent." She turned and walked out, leaving me trembling behind the counter. My head was spinning when I left Rocket Bean. Illegal. I went home, slept for 3 hours in the gray afternoon light, and then got on the bus for my Bright Path shift. Every part of my body ached, a deep, bone-weary protest against being upright. My cleaning route that night included the offices of Morales Associates. It was a small law firm on the 12th floor, always the last one I cleaned. Usually, the office was dark, the whole floor silent. But tonight, the lights were on in the corner office. Jared Morales was there, hunched over a desk piled high with thick, red-ringed binders. He was a young guy, maybe in his mid-30s, and I only knew him from passing him in the hall on rare occasions. He was always kind, though. He'd leave a crisp $10 bill on the desk for me every Friday with a little note. "Thanks for making this place look great. JM." Sometimes, he'd leave a sealed bag of fancy chocolates. He looked up as I wheeled my clattering cart in, and he smiled, though he looked just as tired as I felt. "Hey, Isla, burning the midnight oil, huh?" "You too, Mr. Morales," I said, my voice muffled. I usually tried to be invisible, just emptying his trash and vacuuming around his feet as quickly as possible. "Please, call me Jared. Are you okay? You look exhausted." I hesitated. I looked at this man. A labor rights attorney, it said so on his door. The business card from Denise Parker felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. "They should be scared of what you've built." I stopped vacuuming. the hum of the machine died, leaving the office in silence. Actually, Mr. Morales? Jared? I just got out of the hospital. He immediately put his pen down, his full attention on me. What happened? So I told him, standing there in my gray polo, smelling like Windex. I told him about the 3 jobs. I told him about the 80, sometimes 90-hour weeks. I told him about collapsing on the marble floor just one night earlier. And then I told him about Rick Tanner at the Midnight Mart and his constant threats to round down my hours, how he'd snatched my grandfather's hand away from the Timecard, saying it was company property and he'd adjust it however he liked. Jared listened. He didn't interrupt. He just steepled his fingers, his expression growing more and more serious, a focused, professional anger. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. "Isla," he said, his voice quiet but intense. "That is a textbook case of wage theft, combined with illegal retaliation. He's threatening you to keep you from reporting your full hours. Do you have any documentation, any proof pay stubs, schedules, copies of those time cards?" My breath caught. I might, I said, the words catching in my throat. I pictured my grandfather sitting in the hospital chair, the thick brown folder on his lap. My grandfather, he's been collecting them. He has copies of everything. Jared's eyebrows shot up. He's been keeping a record. He looked genuinely impressed. "Isla, if you can get me that folder, we can do more than just get your money back. We can file an official complaint with the State Labor Board that will trigger a full audit of that entire franchise. We can stop him from doing this to everyone else." I went home that night, my mind racing. Illegal, wage theft, audit. These were words from a world I didn't belong to, a world of consequences. I sat on my futon, the apartment dark. I thought about the dinner, the legacy leadership dinner. My family, all dressed up, celebrating Logan, celebrating a business built on... What was the difference between what they did, displacing tenants for profit, and what Rick was doing, stealing hours from his employees? They were just better at hiding it. They called it business. I thought about a charity event Rocket Bean had hosted months ago, a fundraiser for a local food pantry. I'd been forced to work it for free, serving coffee and smiling. A young woman with bright purple hair and a press badge had come up and interviewed me about working for a company that gives back. I'd been tired and bitter, and I'd been honest. I'd said it was nice, but that raising the minimum wage by $1 would help the staff more than a single charity event. The woman had smiled, a real, sharp smile, and given me her card. Chloe Hart, digital journalist, the City Beacon. Her card said, "Covering everyday injustice." My hands were trembling. I hadn't cried in the hospital. I hadn't cried in front of Denise or Jared. But I was crying now. Quiet, hot tears in the dark. I opened my laptop. I found her email address. I wrote her a long, frantic, rambling message. I told her everything about my family, about Sloan Ridge, about being the uninvited daughter, the one they blocked on social media. I told her about working 3 jobs, about cleaning the same ballroom my family would be celebrating in. I told her about the collapse, about the hospital bracelet still on my wrist, about what Councilwoman Parker and Jared Morales had said. I told her about my grandfather's folder of evidence. I ended it with, "I feel like I'm screaming, and no one can hear me. This dinner is on Sunday. They are celebrating legacy while I'm literally dying from work." I hit send, my heart pounding, convinced I sounded insane. My phone buzzed on the futon next to me. Not 2 hours later, it was an email reply. Subject RE. "I'm the Sloan you've never heard of. Message Isla. I hear you. If what you're describing is real, the wage theft, the family connections, the dinner, this is a story. People need to hear. I'm in. My camera is charged. My notebook is ready. Your family picked the wrong person to erase. Just tell me when." I just stared at the screen. I was stunned. These people, a city councilwoman, a labor lawyer, a journalist, they didn't know me. They knew me as the woman who poured their coffee, the woman who vacuumed their floors. They had no idea I was a Sloane, and they had responded with more immediate, tangible, powerful concern than my own family had shown me in my entire life. I finally understood what my grandfather said. They should be scared of what you've built. I hadn't been building shame. I hadn't been building a legacy of exhaustion. By showing up every day, by being reliable, by doing the work no one else wanted to do, I had built something else. I had built visibility. I had built respect. Every small, polite conversation, every time I stayed late to make sure an office was perfect for a big meeting, every time I remembered a regular's complicated order without asking, I had been quietly earning their trust. I had built a network, an invisible one, right under my family's nose. That evening, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Isla, it was Walter's voice. Grandpa? Hi? Did you rest? I went to work, I admitted. He sighed. A short, impatient sound. Of course you did. That's why this has to happen on Sunday. He paused. I'm finalizing the guest list for my table. Your table, Grandpa. You're the guest of honor. You'll be at the head table. I will be, he said. Wherever I decide the head of the table is. His voice was casual, almost breezy. Tell me, if you had important guests you wanted at this dinner on Sunday, who would they be? I laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. What, are you kidding? I'm not even invited. And you're asking me about a +1? I'm not kidding, he said, his voice suddenly sharp. Who are they? You've been building your world. Who is in it? I sobered. He was serious. This wasn't a fantasy. This was a plan. My mind raced back over the last 24 hours. The people who had seen me. The people who had listened. Okay, I said, my heart starting to pound. Councilwoman Denise Parker. Denise Parker, he repeated. The one from the 5th District. Good. Jared Morales, the labor attorney at Morales and Associates. Morales. Yes, I've read about him. Smart. Who else? And a journalist. Her name is Chloe Hart, from the City Beacon. There was a beat of silence on the line. I thought I'd gone too far. Then, my grandfather chuckled. A dry, soft, delighted sound. A journalist. Oh, Ela, you are my granddaughter. After all. Grandpa, this is crazy. You can't just... Give me their full names and their office addresses, he said, in the exact same casual tone most people use to order takeout. I'll handle the invitations. You just make sure you're there. And Isla? Yes. Wear something other than a uniform. He hung up. I sat there in the dark, my phone in my hand. I scrolled through my contacts, Denise's personal cell, Jared's office number, Chloe's email. My hand was shaking. This wasn't my world. This was a world of power plays, of strategy, of guests and invitations. I realized, with a jolt of terror and a strange, cold thrill, that my family had no idea what kind of game I was about to play. They didn't even know I was on the board. It was 2 days later, 2 days of working on pure, vibrating adrenaline, my body still trying to recover from the hospital, my mind still replaying Walter's words. I was coming home from the morning shift at Rocket Bean, my muscles aching, the smell of espresso grounds permanently etched into my skin. I trudged down the damp, concrete stairs to my basement apartment, my keys already in my hand, my mind on the 3 hours of sleep I might get before my Bright Path shift. I checked the mailbox out of habit, expecting nothing but pizza flyers and a final notice from the electric company, but there was something in there. It was so out of place in the rusted, graffiti-scarred metal box that I thought it was a mistake, a prank, a thick, heavy, cream-colored envelope. It felt like armor. My name, Isla Hudson, was written across the front in elegant, sharp calligraphy. In the top corner, embossed in gold, was a logo, the Crestline Room, and below it, Walter Sloane's 80th birthday legacy dinner. My stomach twisted. I flipped it over. I was expecting my parents' return address. A last-minute gesture of pity. It wasn't. The return address was engraved in sharp black letters: Garner Holt, Attorneys at Law, Crestview Plaza, my grandfather's longtime legal advisors. The ones who handled his estate, his trusts, the real, serious Sloan money. This wasn't a social invitation. This was a summons. My hands were shaking. I fumbled with my key, unlocked my apartment door, and stumbled inside, not even bothering to turn on the light. I ripped the envelope open. Inside was the official, printed invitation, all gold script and flowery language. But tucked inside that was a smaller card, a piece of heavy, textured stationery, the kind I'd only ever seen in movies. On it, in my grandfather's shaky but unmistakable handwriting, were just a few words. Isla, your presence is required. Bring guests who have stood by you. Walter, I read it once, I read it twice, I read it 3 times. Required, not, I hope you can make it, not, we'd love to see you. Required. It wasn't a request, it was a command, and in that single, powerful word, all the fear and humiliation I'd been carrying for a week solidified into something else, something hard and cold and fierce. A strange, animal comfort washed over me. He wasn't asking me to show up and be polite. He was deploying me. My phone rang, shattering the silence. I almost jumped out of my skin. I looked at the screen. Valerie Sloan. Of course, it was immediate. They must have been notified by the law firm at the exact same moment. My hand, still holding the heavy card, was steady as I picked up. Hello? Isla, honey, hi? Her voice was high-pitched, a tight, false cheerful squeak that set my teeth on edge. So I heard you got an invitation. I just got it, I said, my voice flat, holding the cardstock. Oh, wonderful. That's just wonderful. We were so surprised your grandfather, well, he just insisted. You know how he gets in his old age. Just insistent. She laughed, a sound like glass breaking. We were worried, of course, that it might, well, distract from the business focus of the evening. It's such a terribly important night for Logan, you know, for the company. I said nothing. I just let the silence stretch, listening to her panic. I just wanted to call and say, just give me the phone, Valerie. I heard my father's impatient, muffled voice in the background, a rustle, and then his voice, cold and sharp, in my ear. Isla. Dad? I don't know what game your grandfather thinks he's playing, but you listen to me. You are not to cause any scenes on Sunday. Do you understand? This is a professional event. Our key partners, our investors. These are the most important people in the city. This isn't one of your coffee shop poetry nights. I haven't said I'm going. I lied. You will go, he snapped. Because your grandfather required it, and if you don't, he'll cause his own scene. So you will show up. You will sit where you are told to sit, and you will keep your mouth shut. And for God's sake, his voice dripped with sudden, weary disgust. Dress appropriately. Try to look like you belong. We have the highest level of company attending. Before I could even process the insult, I heard another voice, light and mocking, chime in on the speakerphone. Hey, is heard you're crashing the party. Don't worry, I'll save you some scraps from the head table. It was Logan. Logan, shut up, my father growled. I'm just kidding. Logan laughed, a sound I'd hated my entire life. Hey, I've got an idea. Maybe you can serve hors d'oeuvres. You know, make it feel like one of your jobs. You'd probably get some good tips. Logan. This time it was my mother. Her voice a genuine shriek of panic, not because he was being cruel, but because she was afraid. Stop it. What if she doesn't come now? What if she backs out? Your grandfather will be furious at us. He'll blame us. And there it was. The truth. They weren't afraid of me. They were terrified of Walter. They weren't calling to welcome me. They were calling to manage me. I was a problem, a wild card they couldn't control. I looked at the note in my hand. Bring guests who have stood by you. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything. I just pressed the end button, cutting off Logan's entitled, braying laughter. My heart was a cold, hard stone in my chest. I sat down at my rickety kitchen table, opened my laptop, and composed a new email. My fingers flew. I sent it to Denise Parker's personal address, Jared Morales' law firm email, and Chloe Hart's press account. The subject line was Sunday night. It's time. The message was short. I attached a high-resolution photo of the thick, gold-embossed invitation. This is the event I told you about. It's this Sunday at 7 p.m. My grandfather has formally invited me, and his instructions were, and I quote, "Bring guests who have stood by you. I know this is last minute. I know you are all incredibly busy. I will understand completely if you can't, but if you can, this is it. This is the night." I hit send. My stomach was hollow. I half expected them to email back polite, professional regrets. They were a councilwoman, a lawyer, and a journalist. I was a barista. This was a messy, petty family drama. My phone buzzed with the first reply in less than 10 minutes. It was Denise. "Isla, I'm never too busy for this. I've been wanting a reason to have a private conversation with some of your grandfathers and your father's business partners for a very long time. I have a file on Sloan Ridge's development practices that might make for interesting dinner conversation. I'll be there. Send me the address for the valet." My breath hitched. Before I could even reply, a second email notification. "Jared, the Crestline room perfect. I'll bring my portfolio. If wage theft is on the menu, I'd love a seat at the table. I've already drafted the preliminary demand letter for your friends at Midnight Mart. Consider this a chance to do some field research. See you Sunday. JM." I was laughing, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. When the third email came in, "Chloe Hart, camera charged, notebook ready. Your family picked the wrong person to erase. I'm in. This isn't just a family story. Isla, this is a city story. I'll be there. I'll be early." I put my phone down on the table, my hand shaking so hard it clattered against the wood. I had a +3, a councilwoman, a labor attorney, and an investigative journalist. My grandfather had asked me to bring guests. I was bringing an army. The last hurdle was Saturday night. My last shift at the Midnight Mart before the dinner. My body was still aching, but I felt a strange, cold calm. I was stocking cases of brightly colored energy drinks, my movements robotic, when Rick Tanner strode over, his clipboard in hand. He had that fake friendly smile on, the one he used right before he was about to be a nightmare. "Hudson," he said, tapping his pen. "Big night tomorrow." I froze. "What?" "Sunday inventory. I really need you on shift tomorrow night. The new kid. He can't handle the freezer count alone. He's a complete idiot. I'm putting you down for it. 8 p.m. to close." "Rick, I can't," I said, my voice quiet. "I told you, I need Sunday off. I requested it 2 weeks ago." "Yeah, need..." He leaned in, dropping his voice, the smile turning into a sneer. "We're a team here, Hudson, and you've been distracted lately. You miss a big inventory shift like this. It makes me think you're not a team player. Makes me think you're not Midnight Mart material anymore, if you get my drift." The threat was clear. Show up, or you're fired. My stomach turned to ice. This was it. This was the real, practical terror of my life. This was 1/3 of my income. This was my rent. This was my bus pass. This was the difference between eating and not eating. My mind was screaming, just say yes. Just go to the dinner late. It's not worth it. You can't lose this job. I looked at Rick, at his smug, petty face, at the badge that gave him this tiny, awful kingdom. Then I heard Walter's voice, required. I heard Denise's, illegal. I heard Jared's, wage theft. I heard Chloe's, the wrong person to erase. I took a deep breath, the air cold from the freezer case. "No." Rick's face darkened. "What did you say?" I said no. "Rick," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I can't work tomorrow night. I have a family engagement." He stared at me for a long, silent second, his eyes narrowing. He was so used to me saying yes, to me just taking it. Then he let out a short, ugly laugh. A family engagement. Right. You. He scribbled something viciously on his clipboard. Okay, fine. Don't bother clocking in on Monday. You're done. He turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back, his final parting shot. Some of us, he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, actually have to work for a living. I stood there, surrounded by day-glow-colored cans of poison. I'd just been fired. I'd just lost my safety net. The panic was so strong, so immediate. I had to grip the metal shelf to stay standing. I had chosen one night. I had chosen a single, impossible night over the cold, hard reality of my survival. I said yes to one night that didn't revolve around my bosses, and I had no idea it was the night everything else would end. The day before the dinner was a Saturday. I was working my last ever shift at the Rocket Bean. I hadn't told the manager I was quitting. I just wasn't going to show up on Monday. After being fired by Rick, the idea of giving 2 weeks' notice to anyone felt like a joke I wasn't in on. My entire body felt like one giant, throbbing bruise, a souvenir from the hospital collapse. But I was moving. I was upright. My phone, tucked in the pocket of my jeans under my green apron, buzzed. I ducked into the back room. By the overflowing trash cans and giant bags of coffee beans, it was a text from Naomi. You are not going to believe this. A second text came through. It was a picture, blurry, taken in a hurry. It was a photo of a computer screen, showing a digital diagram, a floor plan. I recognized it instantly. It was the main ballroom of the Crestline room. I knew it. I knew the scuff mark on the wood by the west entrance. I knew that the carpet in the far left corner was worn thin. I had vacuumed every square inch of it. Naomi's text. I'm on the setup crew. Picked up a catering side gig for the Sloan party. I just saw the official seating chart. I zoomed in. My fingers, chapped and sore, pinched the screen. The room was dominated by a long, imposing rectangle at the very front, right by the stage. The head table. I could read the names, even blurry. Walter Sloan, Eric Sloan, Valerie Sloan, Logan Sloan, and then a list of the city's heaviest hitters. Mr. Harrington, the banker, Mrs. Vance, the developer, all the key investors. Every single chair was claimed. It was a fortress. My eyes scanned the rest of the chart. Table 1, Table 2, all the good tables, filled with my parents' friends, my cousins, the important people. I kept scanning. Past Table 10, past Table 15. My stomach felt cold. And then I found it. In the farthest, darkest back corner of the massive room. It wasn't just in the back, it was in the corner. It was shoved up against a wall, right next to a black swinging door marked Service Entrance on the diagram. It was the spot where the servers would be crashing in and out all night, the place where the clatter of stacked dish trays and the smell of hot, leftover food from the kitchen would be unavoidable. It was the single worst table in a room designed for perfection, and on the small circle, in tiny, almost unreadable print, Table 19, Isla Hudson, +1. A +1. They had seen my grandfather's command to bring guests, and they had processed it in the most dismissive, insulting way possible. They had given me a standard, pity +1, assuming I'd bring a roommate or, more likely, no one at all. They had hidden me. They had put me, and my sad little guest, in the corner with the noise and the garbage. My phone buzzed again. Naomi. They tried to hide you. Again. Her text was followed by a string of angry face emojis. I stood there in the back room, smelling the sour milk from the steam wand, and I started to laugh. It was a hollow, quiet sound, and it didn't feel like my own. I wasn't even angry. It was just so perfect, so them. They were so predictable, so wrapped up in their own brilliant, petty cruelty, that they had done the one thing they shouldn't have. They had put me right next to the service entrance, right next to the other people who worked. I texted her back, my fingers steady. Perfect. Table 19 it is. It's the best seat in the house. I paused, then added, by the way, I'm changing my +1 to +4. Don't say a word to the event planners. Just, if you're on the floor, make sure there are 5 chairs at that table. I don't care if you have to steal one from table 18. The reply was almost instant. A shocked face gif. Then, oh my God, Isla, 5 people, who are you bringing? I just texted back. You'll see. Don't get caught. I finished my shift. I took my last paycheck. A pathetically thin envelope. I didn't say goodbye to my manager. I just untied my green apron for the last time, threw it in the dirty laundry bin, and walked out the back door into the gray afternoon. My parents and Logan had been shopping at high-end boutiques. I walked 2 blocks down to the second-act thrift store, the one that always smelled like mothballs and someone else's memories. I had $12 in cash from my tips. I went into the cramped, dusty dressing room. The mirror was cracked, and the light was a sick yellow color. I tried on a blue sequined thing that looked like a disco ball had exploded. I tried on a shapeless beige dress that made me look like a sack of potatoes. And then I found it. It was on the vintage rack, which just meant it was old. It was a simple, sharp, sleeveless black sheath dress. No beads, no lace, no frills. It was severe. It was strong. I pulled it on over my head, and it fit. It fit perfectly. For the first time, I wasn't looking at a barista. I wasn't looking at a janitor. I wasn't looking at the family's disappointment. I was looking at me. The dress had a clean, sharp line. It was the opposite of a uniform. It was armor. I checked the tag. $12. I bought it. I went home. I sat on my lumpy futon. I pulled out my phone and created a new group text. I added Denise Parker, Jared Morales, and Chloe Hart. I titled the group Sunday Night Trouble. I sent them a picture of my gold-embossed invitation. This is it. We are confirmed. Then I sent the follow-up. One small detail. They've seated us at table 19. It's in the far back corner, right by the kitchen. I just wanted you all to know. It's not a good table. I held my breath. I was terrified this would be the final straw. They were important people. They were not sit-by-the-kitchen people. This was a petty social humiliation, and I was dragging them into it. My phone lit up. Denise Parker. Table 19. Perfect. No one will see me taking notes. It's harder to observe the room when you're at the head table. I'll be there. Then, Jared. The corner. You say, even better. Allows for private legal consultation. I'd rather not be in the press photos just yet. Can't wait. And finally, Chloe. The service entrance, Isla. That's the best spot in the house. That's where the catering staff, the valets, and the security will be. That's where all the real stories come from. I can get eyewitness accounts. See you at table 19. That evening, as I was eating instant noodles, my last meal before the dinner, my phone rang. An unknown number. Isla? It was Walter. Grandpa. Hi. Did you receive the final seating arrangements? His voice was casual, almost bored. I hesitated. I didn't want him to be angry on his own birthday. I did. I saw the chart. And they put me at table 19, I said quietly, by the service door. I waited for him to sigh, to get angry. Instead, he chuckled. It was a dry, soft, satisfied sound. Table 19. Of course they did. How wonderfully predictable. You're not mad. Mad no but kiddo. His voice was light. Sometimes the best view of a room is from the corner. You can see everyone, and they don't know you're watching. He paused, and I could almost hear the smile in his voice. I did, in fact, request to be seated where I could see everyone. The planners, your mother, I assume, overruled me. For optics, they said the head table needed to be photogenic. I think they'll find my view from table 19 is just perfect. I still didn't understand. I couldn't see the pieces. What? What do you mean? Your view from table 19. You'll see, dear. Just get there, and don't be late. He hung up. I went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I just lay there, my mind racing. I went home to my apartment, my body buzzing. I walked into my bedroom, the one with the single, high window that looked out onto a brick wall. I took out my 3 uniforms: the green, coffee-stained apron; the gray, bleach-faded polo shirt; the blue, pocket-ripped vest. I laid them out, side by side, on my unmade bed. Then, I went to the closet and took out the black dress, the $12 dress. I laid it next to them. I stared at the collection, my whole life, my whole identity for the last 5 years, laid out in cheap fabric. The person they thought I was, and the person I was about to become. I picked up my phone. I took a picture. Not for anyone else, just for me. It was proof. Proof that for one night, just one, I wasn't punching a clock. If you've ever been shoved into the corner of a room on purpose, if you've ever been made to feel small and hidden, you know that's where the pressure builds. You know that's where eruptions usually start, the night of the dinner. The Crestline room was a wound of soft, golden light. It spilled out onto the manicured lawns of the Oak Ridge Country Club, a place I had only ever seen from a bus window or through the filter of my cleaning cart. Valet attendants in crisp, maroon uniforms, looking like soldiers in a play, were ushering an endless stream of silent, obscenely expensive cars under the portico: Bentleys, Porsches, blacked-out Escalades. We arrived in a 2010 Toyota sedan that Jared had borrowed from his brother. It was clean, but it was just a car. The valet who opened my door looked at us, then at the car, with a flicker of confusion, as if we were delivering a pizza. I stepped out first. My legs felt like jelly. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. The $12 black dress felt impossibly thin against the cold night air, which smelled of damp, cut grass, and expensive perfume. I was an imposter. I was a ghost in stolen clothes. Then my armor assembled around me. Denise Parker got out, and the valet's attitude shifted instantly. She wore a dark, tailored pantsuit that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. She radiated an effortless, calm authority. Jared Morales stepped out after her, his leather portfolio tucked under his arm like it contained state secrets. Chloe Hart was last, slinging a compact camera bag over her shoulder, her eyes already scanning, already recording, her expression sharp and hungry. We walked up the stone steps, a strange, mismatched little battalion. I was terrified. They were not. The entrance hall was intimidating, all marble and impossibly tall floral arrangements. A young woman with a perfect smile and a headset stood at a sleek podium, a laptop glowing in front of her. She looked up, her smile fixed. "Good evening. Welcome to the Sloan Legacy dinner. Name: Isla Hudson," I said. Her eyes flicked down her digital list, and her smile tightened, just a fraction. It was a look I knew. It was the look of someone spotting the name that didn't belong. Yes," she said, her voice a perfect, dismissive chime. "Miss Hudson, your +1 can go right in." I took a breath. "It's +4, actually." The hostess's smile froze. Annoyance flickered in her eyes. "I'm sorry. My list says +1. We are at capacity. Denise Parker stepped forward, moving smoothly into the light of the podium. "There must be a mistake," she said, her voice warm and polite. "The invitation said, guests, plural. I'm Councilwoman Denise Parker." The hostess's jaw went slack. Her eyes widened. Councilwoman? "And this is Jared Morales," Jared said, stepping forward as well, his voice quiet but firm. "And Chloe Hart," Chloe added, giving a little wave, her eyes locking on the hostess's badge. The hostess stammered, her professional polish shattered. "Councilwoman Parker, Mr. Morales, Ms. Hart, from the Beacon." Her eyes darted from their faces to mine, in total, panicked confusion. This combination did not make sense. The labor rights lawyer, the city councilwoman who was always trying to tax corporations, the journalist who broke the housing scandal with her, the girl in the $12 dress. Her eyes flicked nervously over my shoulder, toward the main hall. Clearly looking for a manager, or for my mother. She was drowning. You're with Isla," she finally managed to whisper, her gaze fixed on Denise. Denise smiled. It was a calm, warm, utterly devastating smile. She reached out and put her hand briefly on my shoulder. "We're with Isla," she said, her voice clear and carrying just enough. "She's family, isn't she?" The hostess turned pale. She didn't check the list again. She didn't call a manager. She just grabbed 4 placeholder cards and, with a trembling hand, said, "Of course. Right this way. Enjoy your evening." We stepped past her, into the ballroom. The sound hit me first. The low, confident hum of 200 of the city's wealthiest people talking, laughing, and networking, the clink of heavy crystal glasses, a string quartet playing softly in a corner. The room glowed. It was all champagne-colored light and massive, glittering chandeliers, the chandeliers I had dusted, pendant by pendant, on my knees. The air smelled of seared scallops and old money, and then, as we moved past the entrance, the hum faltered, heads turned. Not because of me. At first, no one even saw me. They saw Denise. "That's Denise Parker," I heard a man mutter from a table near the front. "What in God's name is she doing at a Sloan Ridge event?" "She's the one who tried to block the new downtown development," his wife whispered back, her eyes wide. Then the whispers started from another table. "Oh my God, Martha, look, that's Chloe Hart, the journalist, the one from the internet, the one who did that awful piece on the mayor." They saw Denise, a political shark. They saw Chloe, a media bomb thrower. They saw Jared, a man who looked like a serious, unsmiling lawyer. And then, their gaze shifted to the person in the center of this strange constellation, me. And that's when the real confusion set in. The whispers changed. "Who is that with them? Is that one of the Sloans? I've never seen her. She looks young." I saw the head table. It was on an elevated platform, just as Naomi's photo had shown, a long, glittering fortress of power. And I saw them. My father, Eric, was mid-laugh, his hand on an investor's shoulder, a champagne flute held high. His eyes found us, and he froze. The laugh died. The glass stopped in mid-air. My mother, Valerie, was posing for a photographer. Her smile wide and bright. I watched her smile crack. It didn't fade. It stiffened, became a brittle, painted-on grimace, her eyes widening in pure horror. And Logan, my golden cousin, the man of the hour. He was leaning back in his chair, basking in the glow. His gaze followed my father's, and his jaw, his handsome, perfect, future CEO jaw, literally dropped open. His mouth hung open. They were all staring. They were staring at their worst nightmare. They had planned for every contingency, every business deal, every speech. They had not planned for me. My father was the first to move. He shoved his glass into my mother's hand, muttered something to the investor, and started moving. He didn't walk. He hustled, weaving through the tables, his face a terrible mask of strained, white-knuckled charm. He intercepted us before we had taken 10 steps into the room. "Isla." His voice was a forced, hearty boom, but his eyes were chips of ice. What a surprise. We didn't realize you'd be bringing so many guests." His smile was cracking at the edges, his gaze flicking from Denise to Jared to Chloe, assessing the threat level. I had thought my voice would shake. I had thought I would whisper, but I didn't. I stood up straight. The $12 dress felt like armor. "Dad," I said, my voice clear and steady. It cut right through his fake charm. "You remember, the invitation said guests, plural." I gestured to each of them. "This is Councilwoman Denise Parker." Denise nodded, her smile sharp. "Eric, this is Attorney Jared Morales." Jared just looked at him, his expression unreadable. "And this is journalist Chloe Hart." Chloe smiled and flipped open a small, physical notebook. The sound of the paper was loud in the sudden quiet. "They've all been very supportive of me," I continued, my voice level, not a tremor in it. Especially since I fainted at work last week from exhaustion. They've been very interested in my work-life balance." The word fainted hung in the air between us like a bad smell. My father's face went a shade redder. He was trapped. He was standing in front of 200 people, half of whom were now openly watching this quiet, intense confrontation. Before he could speak, Denise stepped forward, extending her hand. "Eric, so good to see you," she said, her voice warm, as if they were old friends. He had no choice but to take it. City labor issues are very close to my heart. As you know, I'm always so interested in how our prominent local businesses, like Sloan Ridge, treat their workers, all of their workers. "Councilwoman," my father choked out, his hand shaking slightly. "Of course, we pride ourselves on our family values. And I just love a good legacy story," Chloe chirped, her pen poised over her notebook. "Especially when there's more going on under the surface. This is quite the family gathering you're having. So many interesting angles." My father was visibly sweating. He looked like a man who had just swallowed a live animal. He had to regain control. He had to hide us. He gestured vaguely, impatiently, toward the back wall. "Well," he said, trying to push us away. "Your table it's over there. The seating chart is very specific. We're at capacity. I'm sure your guests will be comfortable, but we just have very limited room near the front." He was dismissing us. He was sending us to the corner, to the kitchen, where we belonged. Before I could say a word, Jared Morales spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, polite, and absolutely firm. He shifted his leather portfolio from one hand to the other. "That's perfectly fine, Mr. Sloan." My father looked at him, relieved. "We're with Isla," Jared continued. "Wherever she is seated, that's where we'll be. We wouldn't dream of separating from our host." He emphasized the word host. He had just publicly named me as the host, and them as my guests. My father's face went from red to a pale, blotchy white. He had been checkmated, and he knew it. He just stared at us, speechless. I nodded at him. "If you'll excuse us, Dad," and we walked. We left him standing there, frozen in the middle of the aisle. We walked the long walk, past table 1, filled with bankers, past table 5, filled with developers, past table 10, filled with my aunts and uncles, who were staring at me as if I had just risen from the dead. I could feel hundreds of eyes on my back, on my cheap dress, on my impossible, powerful guests. We arrived at the corner, table 19. It was exactly as I'd pictured it, shoved against the wall, the paint chipped. The service door next to us was already swinging, thwack, 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 and the clatter of dishes from the kitchen was loud. But Naomi had been here. There were 5 chairs, 5 wine glasses, 5 perfect, folded linen napkins. We sat down. I took the chair that faced the entire room. The catering staff, lined up by the door waiting to serve the first course, were staring. They weren't whispering about the rich guests. They were whispering about us. One of them, a young woman I recognized from the Bright Path night crew, looked at me, then at Denise, and her eyes went wide. She knew exactly who Denise Parker was. Word was already rippling, not just through the ballroom, but through the staff, the invisible network. The MC tapped the microphone, a high-pitched squeal echoing through the room. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, we are here tonight to celebrate." He was trying to get the night back on track, to erase the disruption. The lights dimmed slightly, the string quartet finished with a flourish, and at that exact moment, the main ballroom doors opened again. A nurse in blue scrubs, not a tuxedo, pushed a wheelchair into the room. My grandfather, Walter Sloan, was in the chair. The room, as one, burst into polite, sustained applause. The MC's voice boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause for the man of the hour, the founder, the legacy himself, Mr. Walter Sloan." At the head table, my father and Logan stood up. They smiled. Their faces instantly rearranged into masks of loving devotion. They clapped, waiting to intercept him, to wheel their patriarch to his rightful place at the head of the table. Walter was wheeled into the center of the room. He didn't look at the stage. He didn't look at his son, or his golden boy grandson, who were walking toward him. His eyes, sharp and clear under his bushy white eyebrows, scanned the entire glittering room. He scanned past the bankers. He scanned past his investors. His gaze swept over the crowd, searching, and then his eyes found the back corner. They found table 19. They locked onto mine. My father and Logan reached him. "Dad," my father said, his voice loud for the crowd. "Dad, we're here. Let's get you to the table. Everyone is waiting." Walter didn't even look at him. He was still looking at me. He raised one thin, papery hand, silencing his son. Then, slowly, deliberately, in front of 200 of the city's most powerful people, my grandfather lifted his old wooden cane. He didn't point it at the head table. He didn't point it at Logan. He pointed it, his arms steady, like a general directing his army, right at me, right at table 19. My father and Logan were frozen, two statues of disbelief, their hands extended to guide a man who refused to be guided. The applause in the room faltered, turning into a confused, scattered noise, then silence. The only sound was the thwack-thwack of the kitchen door next to me. Walter didn't move. He just kept pointing. My father, his face a mask of sweating, smiling rage, finally moved. He and Logan hurried to Walter's wheelchair. "Dad," my father hissed, his voice a low, frantic whisper that I could somehow hear even from the back. "What are you doing?" "The table is here. The photographers." "Take me over there," Walter commanded. His voice wasn't the frail, reedy thing my mother always imitated. It was deep. It was strong. It carried. He pointed again at table 19. A panic, a visible, fluttering panic, erupted among the event staff. The woman with the headset, the hostess from the entrance, ran over, her face pale. She began whispering frantically to my mother, who had rushed off the platform. "He can't," my mother was saying, her voice a high-pitched squeal. "He can't sit there. It's by the kitchen. It doesn't photograph well. The guest of honor can't be in the corner." My father tried to grab the handles of the wheelchair. "Dad, don't be ridiculous. Let's get you to your seat." Walter slammed the metal ferrule of his cane onto the polished marble floor. The crack was so loud it made the MC jump. He raised his voice, and this time, it boomed. It filled the entire cavernous ballroom, silencing every single whisper, every clinking glass. "If my granddaughter," he announced, his eyes locking on mine, "is in the corner, then that is where the head of this family belongs." A collective gasp went through the room. It was not a metaphor. It was a declaration. The nurse, looking utterly terrified of my father, did as she was told. She gripped the handles and began to push the wheelchair. She pushed him past the head table. She pushed him past table 1. She wheeled him down the long aisle, past the staring, horrified faces of my aunts and uncles, past the confused, assessing gazes of the bankers and investors. They parked his wheelchair right at the head of table 19. He was next to me. He was not next to Logan. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. You could hear the ice melting in the glasses. At the head table, my mother looked like she was going to faint. My father looked like he was going to commit murder. Logan just looked blank, lost, like a child whose favorite toy had just been taken. The MC, a slick professional whose smile was now melting off his face, finally stuttered into the microphone. "Well, a man of the people, wonderful, just wonderful, Walter Sloan. Ladies and gentlemen, always keeping us on our toes." He scrambled to get the program back on track. "And now, as we begin our celebration, a toast to the Sloan legacy." I glanced at Chloe. Under the table, out of sight, she had unzipped her camera bag. She wasn't holding it up like a press camera. She had a small, broadcast-quality digital recorder. She placed it on her lap, aimed it at the head table, and pressed the small red button. She was recording. The program limped on. Speeches were made. People I didn't know praised my father's vision and my cousin's brilliant future. Then, It was time for the main toast. My father, Eric Sloan, stepped up to the podium on the stage. He took a deep breath, visibly composing himself. He was a professional, and this was his stage. He put his anger away, replacing it with a look of warm, sentimental pride. "Thank you," he began, his voice smooth and rich. "Thank you all. Tonight is about legacy, and legacy isn't just about buildings, it's about values. It's about sacrifice. It's about the hard work, the grit, that it takes to build something that lasts." His eyes scanned the room, pointedly skipping over table 19. It's about knowing when the time has come to pass that torch, to pass it, to those who have truly earned it, to those who have shown the dedication, the loyalty, and the business sense to carry that legacy into the future. He raised his glass. "To my son, Logan Sloan, the future of Sloan Ridge." The room erupted in applause. It was huge. People stood up, cheering. Logan, back at the head table, beamed. He looked relieved. This was it. This was the moment. The weirdness with the table was forgotten. As the applause swelled, my grandfather, sitting next to me, raised his hand, just a small, simple gesture. The MC saw it. Oh, wonderful. It looks like our guest of honor, Mr. Walter Sloan, would like to say a few words himself." The applause swelled again. Full of genuine warmth, a server scrambled to bring a microphone, the cord stretching, and handed it to Walter. My father and Logan were smiling. This was the perfect capstone. The patriarch, giving his blessing. My mother looked like she was finally breathing again. Walter took the microphone. He waited for the applause to die down. He looked at the heavy silver mic in his hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet, but the microphone carried it everywhere. "Eric, that was a beautiful speech. You spoke about hard work. You spoke about sacrifice. You spoke about earning it." He looked around at the glittering tables. "I want to talk about that, too." He turned to me. He held the microphone in one hand. With the other, he reached into the inside pocket of his wool coat, the same pocket he had tucked it into at the Midnight Mart. He pulled it out, my stained, bent, ink-bled cardboard time card. He laid it on the pristine white linen tablecloth, right next to his untouched plate of scallops. It was a filthy, ugly thing in a room of perfect, expensive things. It was a weapon. He tapped the microphone. "This," he said, "is a time card. It belongs to my granddaughter, Isla." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Logan stopped smiling. He just looked confused. My father's face tensed. Walter picked up the card. He held it up to the light. "I have it because I took it from her, at 2 a.m, at her third job. I'd like to read you her hours, from just 1 week." He squinted at the card. "Monday 16 hours, Tuesday 15.5 hours, Wednesday 18 hours, Thursday." That was the day she collapsed and was taken to the emergency room for exhaustion. She still worked 9 hours first. He looked up. The room was dead silent. "It totals," he said, his voice flat. 79.5 paid hours in 1 week, across 3 jobs, with no overtime pay, and I've since learned, an emergency room visit for malnutrition and severe dehydration. The murmurs were louder now. Logan looked horrified, confused. My mother, Valerie, looked mortified, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's face was no longer smiling. It was a mask of pure, white-hot, reptilian rage. "While this family," Walter continued, his voice getting stronger, "was calling my granddaughter lazy, while you were calling her ungrateful, she was working herself into the hospital. She was propping up her life, all alone, while Sloan Ridge threw parties in buildings that she herself scrubbed down after everyone went home." He gestured to the ballroom around us. "This very room. In fact, she knows it well." He reached under his chair and pulled up the thick, brown folder. The one from the hospital. He didn't open it. He just held it up. "I've been documenting it, all of it, her pay stubs, her schedules, notes from her coworkers, Proof of illegal wage theft. He turned in his chair and handed the entire thick folder, in full view of every investor and every guest, directly to Jared Morales. Mr. Morales, I believe this is what you were waiting for. Jared took it. He opened it, right there at the table. He nodded slowly. It is Mr. Sloan. Thank you. Before my father could explode, Denise Parker leaned forward, her voice calm and clear, but it was amplified by the microphone still in front of Walter. The city, she said, as if she were at a council meeting, is very interested in businesses that exploit their workers. Mr. Sloan, this gathering tonight will provide useful context for our ongoing investigations. And I, Chloe Hart added, her voice bright, finally lifting her small camera to make it visible, am filming a feature story on hidden wage theft, specifically in the backyards of wealthy, prominent families. This is excellent material. A few guests near the front literally choked on their champagne. This is an outrage, my father roared from the stage, finally losing his composure. This is a family matter. He is a sick old man. He is being manipulated. Am I, Eric? Walter said, turning to him. Am I manipulated? Or am I just the only one who has been paying attention? You've been busy, I know, both of you, finalizing the transfer, preparing to pass the torch to Logan. You announced it yourself, on your social media. Valerie, my mother went white. But you seem to have forgotten, Walter continued, that the torch is not yours to pass. It is, and always has been, mine. He let that sentence hang in the air. The investors at the front tables, the ones who had been clapping for Logan, were no longer clapping. They were leaning forward, their expressions fixed and hard. I have been working with my lawyers, Walter said. I have been restructuring my estate, but I have not, and I will not, be signing a controlling interest of Sloan Ridge Properties over to Logan Sloan. A sound came out of my father, a strangled gasp. Logan looked like he'd been physically struck. Instead, Walter said, his voice ringing with absolute, cold authority, I have placed my controlling interest and a substantial portion of my personal wealth into a newly formed trust. The trust will be managed by my granddaughter, Isla Hudson. I stopped breathing. The entire room stopped breathing. Denise, Jared, and Chloe all looked at me, their faces stunned. This was the part I didn't know. She will run it, Walter declared. And the trust's entire endowment will be earmarked for a new foundation. She will also run the Sloan Workers Justice Fund. Its first act will be to compensate the underpaid workers of Bright Path Cleaning, the Rocket Bean Cafe, and the Midnight Mart. Its second act will be to investigate the eviction practices of Sloan Ridge Properties. No, my father leaped off the stage, abandoning the microphone, his face purple. You can't. She doesn't understand business. She doesn't understand anything. You're being manipulated. This is illegal. She's a barista. She is a Sloan, Walter thundered, his voice cracking with a sudden, violent passion. And she understands business better than you do. Eric, you accuse her of not understanding. She has cleaned. At 3 o'clock in the morning, approximately 400,000 square feet of commercial property that you own and have never set foot in. She has served coffee to the tenants you are displacing. She knows this business from the floor up. You only know it from the top down. Logan, his face pale and sweating, tried to save it. He stumbled up to a microphone, laughing, a high-pitched, terrified sound. Grandpa, that's very sweet. A justice fund. That's so like you. He was trying to placate him, to spin it as a sentimental gesture. What a wonderful, sweet idea. We can absolutely fix this all privately later. We can set that up for her as a hobby. A hobby. The investors, however, were not laughing. They were watching Walter. They were glancing at each other, their faces grim. They weren't seeing a sweet gesture. They were seeing a hostile takeover from within. They were seeing their future CEO be publicly, calmly castrated by the one man who mattered, Logan's future was evaporating, right in front of them. Walter Sloan ignored Logan. He ignored my father's sputtering rage. He ignored my mother, who was now openly, silently crying, her mascara running down her perfect face. He turned back to our table. He reached out his thin, spotted hand and tapped the filthy, stained time card that still sat on the white linen. He looked at me, and his eyes were so clear, so proud. "This," he said to the room, his voice dropping to a low, fierce, final judgment, "is the only resume that matters to me. You all praised Logan's resume, but this one, she earned every single line on it while you called her lazy. She is the legacy." The silence in that room was a solid thing. It was heavier than the crystal chandeliers, a thick, suffocating blanket of shock. No one spoke, no one clapped. My father was frozen by the stage, his face a grotesque mask of purple rage. My mother was a statue of smeared mascara. Logan, the golden boy, the future CEO, just looked erased. His mouth was still hanging open. Walter, looking completely unbothered, turned in his wheelchair. He looked past me, to a man I hadn't even noticed, standing quietly against the back wall, right by the service door. A man in a severe, dark suit I didn't recognize, holding a sleek leather briefcase. "Mr. Garner," Walter said, his voice perfectly calm. The man stepped forward, moving with a quiet, reptilian grace. He walked to the microphone that Walter still held. "Thank you. Mr. Sloan," he said. His voice was dry, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. It cut through the silence like a scalpel. "Good evening." He looked out at the 200 stunned faces. "I am Samuel Garner, of Garner and Holt, Mr. Sloan's personal counsel." He held up a thick cream-colored envelope, identical to the one my invitation had come in. "I am here tonight simply to confirm that the legal changes Mr. Sloan just referenced, the complete restructuring of his estate, and the formation of the Sloan Workers' Justice Fund, with Ms. Isla Hudson as sole trustee, are not a proposal." He paused, letting the words land. "They were filed with the State Registrar's Office at 4:55 p.m. this afternoon. They are executed, notarized, and legally binding. The transfer of controlling interest is, as of this moment, complete. It was done. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a sentimental birthday wish. It was a fact, as solid as the marble floor." I watched my parents' faces. They didn't just go pale. They looked hollowed out. The realization hit them like a physical blow. This wasn't a family drama they could spin. This wasn't a misunderstanding they could fix privately later. This was a public, legal, irreversible execution of their entire future. And then, the most incredible thing happened. Mr. Harrington, the powerful banker from the head table, the man who had been laughing at my father's jokes just 20 minutes earlier, quietly picked up his champagne glass. He stood up. He didn't look at my father. He didn't look at Logan. He looked at Walter. Then, his gaze shifted, and he looked right at me. He walked, slowly and deliberately, away from the elevated head table. He walked right over to table 19. He stopped in front of me, Denise, and Jared. "Ms. Hudson," he said, his voice a low, respectful rumble. "A pleasure to finally make your acquaintance. It seems we'll be working together." He raised his glass to me. Fascinating new direction for the company." One of the other key investors, a woman I'd only seen in the society pages, stood up and followed him. Then another. They were like sharks, sensing the blood in the water, sensing in an instant where the power had just moved. They were abandoning the sinking, empty ship of Eric and Logan Sloan, and they were swimming right to my corner table by the kitchen. Walter wasn't finished. He took the microphone back from the lawyer. "Furthermore," he announced, as if he were just adding a minor detail, "a significant portion of my personal estate, effective immediately, will be used to create an anonymous settlement fund." He gestured to Jared and Denise, who were now surrounded by stunned investors. It will be overseen by Councilwoman Parker and Mr. Morales. Its purpose is to compensate any and all current and former employees of the Midnight Mart, Bright Path Cleaning, and the Rocket Bean Cafe who can demonstrate unpaid wages or stolen hours. I encourage them all to come forward. This is slander. A sudden, sputtering, outraged voice erupted from a table near the back. It's lies. She's exaggerating all of it. I turned. I could not believe my eyes. It was Rick Tanner, my manager from the Midnight Mart. He was standing up, his face a blotchy, furious red, his cheap tuxedo bunched around his shoulders. He must have come as someone's +1. "She's a bad employee," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger right at me. "She's lazy. She's always late. She exaggerates everything. We don't owe her anything." Jared Morales, who had been quietly organizing the files in my grandfather's brown folder, stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Mr. Rick Tanner," he said, his voice cutting through Rick's sputtering. "Manager, Midnight Mart, Branch 4, you are currently in violation of Section 7A of the Fair Labor Standards Act, which mandates overtime pay. You are also in violation of Section 15A3, which expressly forbids retaliation against an employee for filing a legal complaint." Jared held up a single piece of paper from the folder. "And this is a sworn affidavit from another one of your employees, stating they personally heard you threaten to round down Ms. Hudson's hours to punish her. That is wage theft, pure and simple. It carries a civil penalty of $10,000 per violation." Rick's mouth snapped shut. He looked like a landed fish. Denise Parker stood up next, her smile calm. "And Mr. Tanner," she said, her voice pleasant, "you should know, based on the information Ms. Hudson provided to my office, we have already scheduled, well, let's call them surprise city inspections, for both the Midnight Mart and Bright Path Cleaning. They'll be happening. Oh, Monday morning, I believe. We are very, very interested in your health code compliance, your fire exits, and of course, your complete payroll records." Rick didn't say another word. He just collapsed back into his chair, his face the color of old oatmeal. My father tried one last, desperate, pathetic tactic. He stumbled back to the microphone on the stage, his mask of charm completely gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading, politician's face. "Please," he begged the room. "Please, this is all a terrible mistake, my father. He's old. He's not thinking clearly, and my daughter, Isla." He looked right at me, his eyes pleading, begging. "Isla, honey, tell them you're not ready for this. It's too much. We can step in. We can help you. More experienced hands can guide this new foundation. For you, we can guide it. Guide it." He meant steal it. He meant hide it. Walter just laughed. It was not a kind sound. It was almost feral. He took the microphone one last time. "Inexperienced," he boomed, his voice cracking with sudden energy. "My granddaughter has worked 90 hours a week for 5 years straight. She has survived on nothing. She has built a network that, in less than 48 hours, brought a sitting councilwoman, a top labor attorney, and an investigative journalist to her side. That doesn't sound inexperienced to me. That sounds like the only person in this room I trust with my money." He pointed his cane at my father. "But you're right. Eric, let's test her experience. I welcome anyone in this room. Any of you investors. Or you, Eric. Or you, Logan. Anyone who thinks she's inexperienced is welcome to shadow her for 1 single week. Just one." He leaned into the microphone. "If you survive her schedule, I'll reconsider." The silence that answered him was total. No one, not my father, not my cousin, not a single person in that room, full of the city's most powerful hard workers, moved a muscle. The challenge was laid, and they all failed it. After that, the party, it didn't end. It just dissolved. The string quartet had stopped playing. People were leaving, huddled in quiet, frantic groups, whispering. The investors were still clustered around our table, no longer talking to me, but trying to get a word with Jared or Denise. I stood up. I needed air. I slipped out the service door, into the quiet, brightly lit kitchen hallway, the smell of bleach and hot food. It was my world. I leaned against the cool tile wall, my heart hammering, trying to breathe. Isla, I turned. My father was standing there, alone. He looked old. He looked beaten. Isla, he said, his voice a ragged, broken whisper. You have to stop this. You have to refuse the inheritance. It's destroying the family. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who had cut me off, the man who had called me ungrateful, the man who had let my mother call me a failure and my cousin mock me for smelling like floor cleaner. My heart was pounding, but my voice was cold and clear. You're wrong, I said. He stepped closer, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. Exactly. We can fix this. Isla, This isn't destroying the family, I cut him off. You already destroyed it. You destroyed it 5 years ago. When you stood at my graduation and told me I was on my own. You destroyed it every Thanksgiving you toasted Logan's success and dismissed my survival. You destroyed it the moment you decided I wasn't part of it. He had no answer. He just stared at me. I walked past him, leaving him alone in the hallway, and went back into the ballroom. I returned to table 19. My little island, the battleground. As I got close, a figure in a black and white catering uniform darted out from behind the service door. It was Naomi. She didn't say anything. She just grabbed me in a fierce, desperate hug, smelling like spilled wine and pure triumph. She pulled back, her eyes shining with tears. That, she whispered, was legendary. I got the entire speech on my phone. The next few days were a blur, but for the first time in my life, it was a blur that I was in control of. On Monday morning, I didn't go to Rocket Bean in my green apron. I walked in at 9 a.m., wearing my $12 black dress. It was my new uniform. The owner, a man who had barely looked at me for 3 years, rushed out from the back office. Isla, I heard about the dinner. Please, you're not quitting, are you? I am, I said. Look, he said, his voice panicked. We can raise your wage $1.50 an hour. Just please don't let that foundation investigate us. I just looked at him. You should have done that 5 years ago. Pay your other staff what they're worth. I untied the green apron I'd brought in my bag, and I left it on his counter. Next, Bright Path Cleaning. I went to the supervisor's office. He was the one who had always told me to scrub faster. He looked up from his computer, annoyed. What do you want? Hudson. You're late for your shift. I didn't say anything. Jared Morales walked in right behind me, holding his leather portfolio. Mr. Stevens, I'm Jared Morales. I'm here to serve you with a class action lawsuit on behalf of your entire night shift cleaning staff for unpaid wages and illegal break policies. Would you like to accept this, or should I give it to your boss? I dropped my gray polo shirt on his desk and walked out. My last stop was the Midnight Mart. Rick was there. He was, as always, yelling at the new kid for stacking the soda cans wrong. He saw me and his face went purple. You've got nerve. You're fired. I told you, get out of my store. You're right, I said. I am. The automatic doors hissed open behind me. Mr. Tanner. It was Denise Parker. She was flanked by 2 people in official city uniforms, holding clipboards. I'm Councilwoman Parker. This is the city health inspector, and this is a representative from the State Labor Board. We're here for your surprise audit. We'd like to see your complete payroll records and your walk-in freezer, immediately. Rick's face went from purple to a color I had never seen on a human being. I held out my blue vest. You should probably get that, I said. 2 weeks later, I was in a modest, new office space downtown. The paint was still fresh. It smelled like possibility, not bleach. The sign on the glass door said, The Sloan Workers Justice Fund. My team was small. Jared was our chief counsel. Chloe was handling our media. And at the desk opposite me, Answering the phones was my new office manager, Naomi. She was typing furiously, then looked up at me and grinned. "The phone is ringing off the hook," she said. "The entire night shift from Bright Path wants to join the suit." The door opened. It was Walter. He was in his wheelchair, but his eyes were bright. He looked around the small, bustling office, at the second-hand desks and the whiteboard covered in plans. He looked proud. He wheeled himself over to my desk. I was just sitting there, looking at a stack of pay stubs from another company, another case. "Grandpa," I said, my voice quiet. "Thank you." He waved his hand, dismissing it. "No," I said, standing up and walking over to him. "I mean it. That night, at the Midnight Mart, when you took my time card, I thought my life was over. I thought you were about to get me fired, that I was going to lose everything." He looked up at me, his gaze clear and steady. "I took it," he said, his voice soft, "so you could finally clock out of surviving and clock into living." And that's what I did. I clocked in. If you've ever worked yourself sick while your family, or your boss, called you lazy, if you've ever been erased, I see you. If you've ever felt invisible, let this be your proof that you are not. They may have written you off, but they have no idea what you're building in the shadows. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. So drop a comment below and let's chat about your own thoughts. If you've ever been in a situation like this, I want to hear about it. Please, if this story resonated with you, subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories and give this video a like. And if you really want to support this channel and help this story get heard, please press that hype button. It helps more than you know. And it might just find someone else sitting in a break room right now, thinking they're alone. If your family or your boss wrote you off, remember this: your time card is proof you showed up when nobody else did. One day, that might be exactly what turns everything in your favor.